Please don't hurt me. I'll bear you strong children if you spare me." The words hung in the dusty air like smoke from a dying fire. Clementine Washington pressed her back against the charred wall of the abandoned homestead, her dark eyes fixed on the man who held her fate in his weathered hands. John Marston stood frozen in the doorway. His Colt revolver trembled slightly, the barrel pointed at the ground between them. The bounty poster crinkled in his other hand. $500. Dead or alive. The woman before him wasn't what he'd expected. Her calico dress was torn and stained with travel, but her spine remained straight. Her hair, escaped from its pins, framed a face that spoke of intelligence and stubborn dignity. This was no common criminal. Something in her eyes stopped him. Cold, not fear alone, but a terrible resignation. She'd made this offer before. The thought made his stomach turn. "Ma'am." His voice came out rougher than intended. "I think you got me all wrong. I ain't that kind of man." He lowered the gun. Completely. The hammer clicked softly as he eased it down. Clementine blinked. Her shoulders remained tense, ready to run or fight despite her words. "You're here for the bounty." "I am." John holstered the weapon. "But not like that. Never like that." The wind whistled through the broken windows. Ash from the long dead. Fire stirred in the corner. This place had seen its own share of violence, its own desperate endings. "What do you want then?" She shifted slightly, measuring the distance to the back door. John studied the poster again. Theft. Assault. The crime seemed small compared to the intelligence in her eyes, the careful way she held herself. "What did?" "You really do? Does it matter?" "It does to me." A horse whinnied in the distance, then another. Clementine's head snapped toward the sound, her body going rigid. "You brought others?" "No." John moved to the window, peering through the cracked glass. 3 riders approached at a steady pace. He recognized the lead horse immediately, Dutch van der Berg's big bay stallion. "We got company." He turned back to her. "Friends of yours?" "I don't have friends." Clementine was already moving toward the rear of the cabin. "Only people who want me dead and people who want me worse. Dutch ain't the patient type. He finds you here, there won't be questions." She paused at the back door, studying his face. "Why should I trust you? Because I'm the only chance you got." The riders were closer now. John could make out Dutch's voice calling orders to his men. They'd circle the building, cut off all escape routes, standard procedure for cornering prey. The root cellar. Clementine pointed to a nearly invisible trapdoor beneath a fallen beam. "Found it when I came in." "Goes under the back wall." John nodded. "You first." "After you." "Lady, I'm trying to help you. Men always say that." But she moved toward the trapdoor anyway, lifting the heavy wood with surprising strength. The space below was narrow and dark. Ancient potatoes rotted in wooden bins. The smell of damp earth and decay filled the air. Clementine dropped down first, her movements quick and practiced. John followed, pulling the trapdoor closed above them just as boots thundered onto the front porch. The cellar was barely wide enough for both of them. John's shoulder pressed against hers in the darkness. She didn't pull away, but he felt her. Tension like a coiled spring. Above them, Dutch's voice boomed through the floorboards. "John Marston. I know you're in there, boy. That's something that belongs to me." John remained silent. Clementine's breathing was steady beside him, controlled. She'd done this before, hidden in small spaces while dangerous men hunted her. "Check the back rooms," Dutch ordered. "She's here somewhere. Trail goes cold right at the door." Boots stomped overhead. Furniture scraped against the floor. John felt Clementine flinch when something heavy crashed down. "Nothing, Dutch. Place is empty." "Then where'd she go?" "Ghosts don't leave tracks." John waited until the footsteps moved away from their hiding spot. Then he whispered, barely audible, "There's a tunnel Goes out past the well. She turned toward him in the darkness. How do you know? Used to be a station. Underground railroad. Understanding passed between them in the narrow space. She'd traveled this route before, following the hidden paths that led people like her toward freedom. Dutch won't give up easy, she whispered back. No, he won't. Above them, the search continued. Dutch's men grew increasingly frustrated, their movements more violent. Something shattered against the wall. She was here, Dutch muttered. Blood on the wall, fresh tracks in the dust. John's hand moved instinctively toward his gun. If they found the trapdoor, there'd be no talking their way out. Dutch shot first and asked questions later. Maybe she doubled back, one of the men suggested. Headed for the river. Maybe. Dutch's voice carried doubt, or maybe she had help. The words hung heavy in the air above them. John felt Clementine's hand brush his arm, a warning to stay still. She understood the danger better than he did. Check the perimeter again, Dutch ordered. Look for any signs she left this place. The boots moved away from the cabin. John counted 3 sets of footsteps heading toward the corral. When the sounds faded, he pushed gently against the trapdoor. A thin line of light appeared. The cabin was empty. They'll be back, Clementine said as they climbed out. I know. John brushed dirt from his coat. That's why we need to move. We? He looked at her directly. You got somewhere else to go? She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes searched his face, looking for deception or hidden motives. Finally, she shook her head. Then we're partners until we figure this out. I don't even know your name. John Marston. He touched the brim of his hat. And you're Clementine. Washington. Says so on the poster. What else does it say? John pulled out the crumpled paper. Theft. Assault. $500. He looked up at her. What it doesn't say is why. Does it matter? It does to me. She studied his face for a long moment. Then she moved toward the back door, her decision made. Then I guess you'll have to earn that story. John followed her into the fading afternoon light. Behind them, the abandoned homestead held its secrets. Ahead lay uncertain ground, dangerous men, and questions that demanded answers. But for the first time in months, neither of them walked alone. They moved through the scrub grass behind the homestead, their steps muffled by the soft earth. Clementine's skirts whispered against the brush. John's spurs were wrapped in cloth to silence their jingle. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly. Sweat traced lines through the dust on their faces. Neither spoke of the heat or the thirst already building in their throats. Behind them, Dutch's voice carried on the wind. He'd found the root cellar. Smart girl, his words drifted across the empty land. But not smart enough. John's jaw tightened. Clementine kept walking, her pace steady despite the tremor in her hands. She'd heard those words before, felt the weight of men who thought her cleverness was a challenge to be broken. They reached a dry creek bed carved deep into the prairie. The banks offered cover from prying eyes. John slid down first, then offered his hand to help her descend. She ignored the gesture. Jumped down herself, landing with practiced grace. The creek bed stretched eastward toward a line of cottonwoods. Dead fish bones littered the sandy bottom. The drought had claimed this waterway months ago, leaving only the memory of better times. How far to the river? Clementine asked. 3 miles. Maybe 4. She nodded, already moving. Her stride was longer than he'd expected, more purposeful. This woman had covered ground before, knew how to eat distance without wasting energy. The banks rose higher as they walked. Soon they were moving through a natural canyon, sheltered from the wind and the eyes of anyone tracking them. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions. John studied her profile as she walked. The set of her shoulders spoke of burdens carried too long. The way she favored her left foot suggested an old injury, carefully hidden. Her hands moved constantly, checking pockets, adjusting her torn sleeve, touching the small leather pouch at her waist. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "What did you expect? Someone harder, meaner?" She glanced at him sideways. Disappointment? Relief? The word hung between them. Clementine's steps faltered slightly, then resumed their steady rhythm. She'd learned not to trust relief, not to believe in the kindness of strangers. They rounded a bend in the creek bed. Ahead, the cottonwoods grew thicker, their roots exposed in the dry earth. A mockingbird called from somewhere in the branches, its song sharp and lonely. "The things they say I did," Clementine said quietly. "Some of them are true." John waited. The rhythm of their walking was hypnotic, their shadows stretching long. Across the sandy ground, I took medicine from a doctor's bag, food from a store, clothes from a line. Her voice was steady, matter-of-fact, but not for myself. For who? Children, sick ones, dying ones. The words settled between them like stones in still water. John understood the weight of watching children suffer, the desperation that drove good people to desperate acts. The assault charge? Man tried to stop me. Tried to put his hands where they didn't belong. She touched the small knife at her belt. I persuaded him otherwise. John's respect for her grew. She'd fought for her dignity, protected those who couldn't protect themselves. In his book, that made her a hero, not a criminal. They climbed out of the creek bed as it began to shallow. The cottonwoods were close now, their leaves rustling in the breeze. The sound of water reached their ears, faint but unmistakable. "There's something else," John said as they walked. "Reason I need that bounty money." Clementine's hand moved too. Her knife hilt. The gesture was subtle, practiced. She'd learned to expect the worst from men who needed things. "My sister Clara, she's sick, real sick." John's voice roughened. "Doctor says she needs medicine from back east. Costs more than I make in a year. So you hunt people for money. I hunt bad people for money." Usually, the distinction mattered to him. Clementine heard it in his tone, the way he emphasized bad. She'd misjudged him, just as he'd misjudged her. They reached the riverbank. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, the water ran low but clear, carving its way through red clay banks. Fish jumped in the shallows, their splashes the only sound in the gathering dusk. Clementine knelt beside the water, cupping it in her hands to drink. The liquid was cool and sweet, cutting through the dust in her throat. John waited his turn, watching the tree line for any sign of pursuit. "Your sister," she said when she'd finished drinking. "What kind of sickness?" "Fever that comes and goes, weakness. Doctor calls it consumption." Clementine's eyes sharpened. She'd seen the wasting disease before, knew its cruel progression. But she'd also seen people recover, given the right treatment and care. "There are plants," she said carefully, "herbs that can help. Not a cure, but they can make the breathing easier. Give her strength." John looked up from the water. "You know medicine?" "Some. My grandmother taught me before she died." Clementine stood, brushing dust from her skirts. "But the plants I'd need, they don't grow around here." "Where do they grow?" "Apache territory. Mountains to the west." The words hit John with the force of a physical blow. Apache lands were dangerous for anyone, deadly for a white man and a runaway slave traveling together. But if there was a chance to help Clara, he had to take it. "How dangerous?" "Very, but I know people there. Traded with them before." Clementine met his eyes. "I help your sister, you help me get there alive. It was a fair trade. More than fair." John extended his hand, and this time she took it. Her grip was firm, calloused from hard work and harder living. "Partners," he said. "Partners." They shook once, sealing the agreement. Neither smiled, but something shifted between them. Trust was too strong a word, but mutual respect had taken root. The sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Soon it would be dark enough to travel without being seen. Dutch would expect them to follow the river, so they'd cut across country instead. "We should move," John said. "Dutch knows this area too well." Clementine nodded, already gathering her skirts for the journey ahead. The Apache lands lay. 2 days' hard travel to the west. Between here and there stretched empty country, hostile territory, and the ever-present threat of Dutch's pursuit. But for the first time since leaving the homestead, neither of them faced the darkness alone. They turned their backs on the river and headed into the gathering night. Behind them, the water continued its patient journey toward the sea. Ahead lay mountains and medicines, danger and hope intertwined. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. Clementine breathed it in, finding strength in the familiar smell of growing things. John checked his weapons one final time, then settled into the steady pace that would carry them through till dawn. They moved as shadows across the empty land. Two broken people bound by necessity and the fragile hope of healing. The stars emerged one by one above them, marking their passage through the vast indifference of the night. They walked through the night, their footsteps muffled by sand and dried grass. The stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant. John's boots found their rhythm beside Clementine's softer tread, 2 heartbeats moving through the sleeping world. By dawn, they'd covered 15 miles. The landscape had changed from prairie to rolling hills dotted with mesquite and prickly pear. Red rocks jutted from the earth like broken teeth. The air tasted of dust and something sharper, more elemental. "Storm coming," Clementine said, reading the sky. Dark clouds gathered to the west, their bellies heavy with rain. The wind carried the scent of lightning, ozone sharp against their faces. They'd need shelter soon. John spotted the cave first, a dark mouth in the hillside surrounded by fallen boulders. Not deep, but enough to keep them dry. They settled in as the first drops began to fall. The storm broke with sudden violence. Rain hammered the earth, turning dust to mud in minutes. Wind howled through the cave mouth, carrying the smell of wet sage and clean stone. They sat in silence, watching water cascade down the rocks. The sound was hypnotic after so many dry months. Clementine held her hands out to catch the drops, letting them run between her fingers. "Haven't seen rain like this since spring," she said. "Clara always loved storms." John's voice was quiet, almost lost in the thunder. "Used to stand on the porch and watch the lightning." "Tell me about her." John's hands worked at his gun belt, adjusting the leather with practiced movements. "Stubborn, smart, too smart for her own good sometimes. Sounds familiar." He looked at her then, seeing something in her face that made him pause. The way she held herself, the set of her shoulders. There was strength there, but also a deep weariness. "You got family?" he asked. "Had." The word fell flat, final. "Grandmother who raised me. Others I traveled with. What happened to them?" Clementine's hands stilled in her lap. The rain drummed against the cave walls, filling the silence between them. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible above the storm. "Sickness took some. Bounty hunters took others. The lucky ones made it north." John heard the grief in her words, the weight of too many losses. He'd seen that look before, on soldiers who'd buried too many friends. The walking wounded, carrying their ghosts. "I'm sorry. Don't be. We all knew the risks." But her voice cracked slightly on the last word. John pretended not to notice, giving her the dignity of her composed mask. The storm raged for hours. They dozed fitfully, backs against the cave wall, careful not to touch. When John woke, Clementine was gone. Panic flared in his chest. He reached for his gun, already imagining Dutch's men dragging her away. Then he heard singing, soft and low, coming from deeper in the cave. He found her tending to something in the darkness. Her hands moved with practiced precision, gentle but sure. As his eyes adjusted, he saw what held her attention. A coyote pup, injured and frightened. Its leg was twisted, probably broken. The mother was nowhere to be seen. Found him shivering in the back, she said without looking up. Legs bad but not hopeless. She'd torn strips from her petticoat to make splints. The pup whimpered but didn't struggle, somehow sensing her intent to help. Her touch was careful, reverent. "You don't have to do this," John said. "Yes, I do." The certainty in her voice stopped him. This wasn't about the pup. This was about something deeper, some need to heal that lived in her bones. "My grandmother used to say every life has purpose," Clementine murmured as she worked. "Even the smallest ones." John watched her hands, so gentle with the frightened creature. These were the hands of a healer, not a criminal. Whatever crime she'd committed, they came from compassion, not cruelty. "Where did you learn all this?" "Started with dolls. Bandaging their arms, setting their broken legs." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Grandmother said I had the touch. The gift. But you couldn't practice, not legally." "No," the word was bitter, too dark, too female. "Too free." The last word hung in the air between them. John understood the weight of it, the courage it took to claim that freedom, and the price she'd paid for it. The rain began to ease. Water still dripped from the cave mouth, but the thunder had moved on. The pup settled into sleep, its breathing steady and calm. "I used to practice medicine," John said suddenly. "Army medic during the war." Clementine's hand stilled. "Used to?" "Lost too many. Boys who should have gone home to their mothers." His voice was rough with old pain. "Stopped believing I could help anyone." "What changed?" John looked at her, then at the sleeping pup. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. They sat in the growing quiet, two wounded healers sharing the weight of their failures. Outside, the storm clouds began to break apart, letting through shafts of golden light. "There's something else," John said. "About Clara. About why I really need that bounty money." Clementine waited, her attention focused entirely on his words. "She writes letters to the territorial governor about conditions in the territories, about how people are treated." He paused. "She's been asking too many questions about Dutch's operation." Understanding dawned in Clementine's eyes. She's in danger. More than just from the sickness. Dutch doesn't like troublemakers. "So you hunt bounties to buy her medicine and keep her safe." "Tried to, but now I've made things worse." John's hands clenched into fists. "By helping you, I've made an enemy of the most dangerous man in 3 territories." Clementine reached out, her fingers briefly touching his wrist. The contact was light, but it steadied him. "Then we help each other," she said simply. "Get the medicine for Clara. Keep her safe. Keep each other safe. You don't understand how dangerous Dutch is. I understand plenty about dangerous men." Her voice carried steel beneath the softness. "I've been running from them my whole life." The rain stopped. Sunlight streamed through the cave mouth, warm and golden. The pup stirred, lifting its head to look at them with bright, trusting eyes. "We should move," John said. "Storm will have washed out our tracks, but Dutch is persistent." Clementine nodded, already gathering her makeshift medical supplies. She'd fashioned a small sling from more fabric, a nest for the pup to rest in as they traveled. "You're taking him?" "Can't leave him here." "To die." John started to protest, then stopped. The pup was small, wouldn't slow them down much. And something in Clementine's face told him this wasn't negotiable. They emerged from the cave into a world washed clean. The air smelled of rain and growing things. Steam rose from the wet rocks, creating small clouds that drifted across the landscape. "Apache lands are still a day's walk," Clementine said, adjusting the sling across her shoulder. "If we push hard, then we push hard." They set off across the rain-soaked earth, their footsteps leaving clear prints in the mud. Behind them, the cave held the memory of their shared confessions, the first tentative threads of trust. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist. Ahead lay mountains purple with distance, Apache territory, and the plants that might save Clara's life. John found himself watching Clementine as they walked. The way she moved, the careful attention she paid to the healing pup. She was nothing. Like the criminal on the wanted poster. She was something far more dangerous to his carefully guarded heart. A healer. Like he'd once been, before the war broke something inside him. Maybe, he thought as they climbed toward the distant peaks, some things could be healed after all. The Apache scouts found them at dawn. John woke to the sound of horses breathing, the creak of leather, the whisper of steel against wood. 3 warriors sat motionless on their mounts, silhouetted against the rising sun. They'd approached without sound, ghosts made flesh in the morning light. Clementine was already awake, sitting cross-legged with her hands visible and empty. The coyote pup slept peacefully in her lap, untroubled by the tension that stretched between the two groups. "I know you," the lead warrior said in careful English. His face was weathered bronze, marked by old scars. "You traded with us before." "I did." Clementine's voice was steady, respectful. "Medicine for your people. Good medicine." The warrior's eyes shifted to John, taking in the gun belt, the white skin, the way he held himself. "This one is different." "He is with me." The simple words carried weight. John felt the shift in the air, the way the other warriors relaxed slightly in their saddles. Clementine's reputation preceded her, bought them safe passage through the first test. "Chief Sitting Bull will decide," the warrior said. "You come, both." They followed the Apache scouts through country that grew more rugged with each mile. Red stone formations rose from the earth like ancient monuments. Pine trees clung to impossible slopes, their roots finding purchase in hairline cracks. The village lay hidden in a canyon, invisible until they were almost upon it. Lodges made of hide and timber clustered around a central fire pit. Children played in the shadows, their laughter echoing off the canyon walls. But something was wrong. The laughter was forced, desperate. The adults moved with the careful precision of people holding themselves together through will alone. "What happened here?" John asked quietly. "Sickness," one of the scouts replied. "The chief's son. Nothing helps." They were led to the largest lodge, its entrance flap decorated with symbols John didn't recognize. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of herbs and smoke. An old man sat beside a small fire, his face carved by years of leading his people through hardship. Chief Sitting Bull looked up as they entered. His eyes were dark pools of grief and fading hope. "You return," he said to Clementine, "but you bring a white man to our sacred place." "I bring a healer," she replied. "Like myself." John felt the weight of the chief's scrutiny, the way those ancient eyes seemed to see through flesh and bone to the truth beneath. He'd been evaluated by generals and politicians, but this felt different, more personal. "My son is dying," the chief said finally. "Your medicine woman tried. Our medicine man tried. The boy grows weaker. May I see him?" The chief gestured toward the back of the lodge. A young boy, perhaps 8 years old, lay on a bed of furs. His breathing was labored, his skin hot with fever. John recognized the symptoms immediately. Infection, deep and spreading, probably from a wound gone bad. Clementine knelt beside the boy, her hands gentle as she examined him. She pulled back the furs, revealing a bandaged leg. The cloth was stained with blood and something worse. "How long has he been like this?" "5 days," the chief replied. "Since the horse kicked him." John moved closer, his medical training overriding his nervousness. The wound was serious, but not hopeless. With proper treatment, drainage, the right herbs, the boy could recover. "The infection is spreading," Clementine said quietly, "but we can stop it." "How?" She looked at John, a question in her eyes. He understood what she was asking. This would require both their skills, his surgical knowledge, and her herbal expertise. "We work together," he sighed. The chief's eyes moved between them, weighing their words against his son's life. Finally, he nodded. "What do you need?" "Clean water, sharp knives, fire." Clementine was already moving, her hands busy with preparations, and privacy. "This will take time." The chief cleared the lodge of everyone except the boy's mother, a woman whose face held the same carved strength as her husband's. She sat in the shadows, watching every move they made. John cleaned his hands in the hot water, scrubbing until his skin was raw. Clementine prepared her herbs, grinding them into paste with practiced efficiency. The coyote pup watched from its sling, sensing the gravity of the moment. "I'll need to open the wound," John said. "Drain the poison. And I'll pack it with medicine once you're done." They worked in careful synchronization, John's surgical precision guided by Clementine's knowledge of healing plants. The boy stirred, but didn't wake, lost in fever dreams. Hours passed. The sun tracked across the sky, sending shafts of light through the lodge's smoke hole. John's hands grew steady as he worked, muscle memory returning from countless battlefield surgeries. This was what he'd trained for, what he'd been good at, before the war taught him that skill wasn't always enough. "There," he said finally, tying off the last bandage. "It's done." Clementine applied her herbal poultice, the plants she'd gathered during their journey mixed with others from the Apache medicine stores. The boy's breathing was easier already, the fever beginning to break. "Will he live?" the chief asked. "He'll live," Clementine replied, "but he needs rest. And these herbs twice daily until the wound heals." The chief's wife approached, her hands trembling as she touched her son's cooling forehead. Tears carved tracks down her weathered cheeks. "You have given us back our future," she whispered. John felt something shift inside his chest, a loosening of the knot that had lived there since the war. He'd forgotten this feeling, the pure satisfaction of healing rather than hurting. "The herbs I need for my friend's sister," Clementine said. "For the lung sickness," the chief nodded immediately. "Take whatever you need. Stay as long as you wish." "We can't stay long. There are men hunting us. Then they will find nothing but empty wind." The chief's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "You are under our protection now." That night, they shared the evening meal with the tribe. The boy was awake, weak but alert, his mother spooning broth into his mouth. The other children played around the fire, their laughter genuine now. John sat beside Clementine, watching the flames dance. The coyote pup slept in her lap, its leg already healing. She'd saved 2 lives today, reminded him that he could still save lives too. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For helping me remember who I used to be." She looked at him then, firelight catching in her eyes. "Maybe it's not about who you used to be. Maybe it's about who you're becoming." The words settled between them, heavy with possibility. Around them, the Apache sang their ancient songs, voices rising and falling with the rhythm of the flames. Tomorrow they would gather the herbs needed for Clara. Tomorrow they would face the journey back through hostile territory. But tonight, in this hidden canyon, they were safe. John's hand moved almost without conscious thought, covering Clementine's where it rested on the pup's fur. She didn't pull away. Her fingers turned, palm against palm, and for a moment they held onto each other and the fragile hope they'd built together. The fire crackled, the stars wheeled overhead, and in the silence between heartbeats, something new was born. Chief Sitting Bull watched them from across the fire, his ancient eyes knowing. He'd seen this before, 2 wounded souls finding healing in each other's presence. The tribe would remember this night when the medicine woman and the white healer saved more than just one boy's life. They'd reminded everyone present that some things were worth believing in. They left the Apache Canyon at dawn, saddlebags heavy with medicinal herbs. Chief Sitting Bull's son waved goodbye from his mother's arms, his fever broken, his leg healing. Clean. The coyote pup rode in a new sling across Clementine's chest, alert and curious about the world beyond the canyon walls. The journey back took them through country that felt different now. The same red rocks, the same endless sky, but something had shifted between them. John caught himself watching Clementine's hands as she worked, the way she held her head when listening to distant sounds. She was beautiful. The thought came unbidden, settled in his chest, like a bird finding its roost. Not the porcelain beauty of Eastern ladies, but something deeper. The beauty of competence, of compassion worn smooth by hardship. "Town's just over that ridge," John said as they crested a hill. "Clara will be waiting." But the valley below told a different story. Smoke rose from too many chimneys for a summer afternoon. People moved in the streets with the quick, nervous energy of those living under threat. "Something's wrong," Clementine said. They approached the town carefully, keeping to the shadows between buildings. The saloon was packed despite the early hour. Voices carried through the bat-wing doors, tense and angry. "Dutch has got the whole place scared," someone was saying. "Looking for that bounty hunter and his woman." John's blood went cold. They'd been so careful, covered their tracks, taken the long way around. But Dutch had anticipated their destination, laid his trap where it would hurt most. "We need to get Clara and leave," he whispered. "Where is she?" "Boarding house. End of the street." They made their way through the back alleys, using outbuildings and wagons for cover. The boarding house sat quiet in the afternoon heat, its windows dark. Too quiet. John's hand moved to his gun as they approached the back door. Something was wrong. Clara always kept the kitchen window open, always had music playing on her little music box. The silence felt like a held breath. The door was unlocked. Inside, the kitchen was neat, undisturbed. Clara's apron hung on its peg. Her teacup sat clean and dry beside the sink. But she was nowhere to be found. "Clara?" John called softly. No answer. They searched the small rooms, finding nothing out of place, but everything wrong. Clara's bed was made, her clothes still in the wardrobe. But her traveling bag was gone, along with her papers and the small derringer she kept for protection. "She left in a hurry," Clementine observed. "But she packed." John sank into Clara's chair, his head in his hands. They'd come so far, risked so much. The herbs that could save her life sat useless in his saddlebags while Clara herself had vanished. "There's something else," Clementine said quietly. "Look at this." She'd found a letter on the kitchen table, hidden beneath a dish towel. John's name was written on the envelope in Clara's careful script. Inside, her words were brief and urgent. "John, Dutch knows about my letters to the governor. He's taken the schoolteacher's children. Says he'll trade them for you and the woman. Meet him at the old mine at sunset. I've gone ahead to try to help them. Don't come alone. Clara." The paper crumpled in John's fist. Dutch had crossed a line, involved innocents in his private war. Children who had nothing to do with bounties or justice, or the complex web of loyalty and betrayal that bound the adult world. "It's a trap," Clementine said. "I know." John stood, checking his weapons with grim efficiency. "But those children don't deserve to pay for my choices. Our choices." He looked at her sharply. "This isn't your fight." "Yes, it is." Her voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "I'm tired of running. Tired of letting men like Dutch decide who lives and who dies." They prepared in silence, checking weapons, dividing the medicinal herbs between them in case they were separated. The coyote pup sensed the tension, whimpering softly until Clementine soothed it with gentle touches. "If something happens to me," she said, "take the pup to the Apache. They'll care for him. Nothing's going to happen to you." "John," she turned to face him fully. "What I said that first day, about bearing children, I was scared, desperate. But if we survive this, if we find a way to build something together, I want you to know that those words didn't come from weakness." He moved closer, his hands finding her shoulders. What did they come from? Hope, the first I'd felt in years. They stood there in Clara's kitchen, the weight of unspoken feelings heavy between them. John's thumb traced the line of her cheek, and she leaned into the touch. "We'll get through this," he said. "Together." Together. They kissed then, soft and fierce, and full of all the things they might never get to say. The taste of her, the way she fit against him, the promise of a future that felt suddenly possible. The sound of horses in the street broke them apart. Through the window, they saw riders approaching. Not Dutch's men, but something equally unexpected. Clara rode at the head of a column of federal marshals, her traveling dress dusty from hard. Riding, behind her came a dozen men in official badges, their faces grim with purpose. "John," Clara called as she dismounted. "Are you in there?" He opened the door, confusion and relief warring in his chest. "Clara, what's happening?" "I should have told you sooner." She pushed past him into the kitchen, her eyes taking in Clementine with sharp intelligence. "I'm not just a correspondent for the territorial governor. I'm a federal agent." The words hit John like a physical blow. Everything he'd believed about his sister, about his own mission, crumbled and reformed in the space of a heartbeat. "The bounty hunting?" he asked. "Cover story. I needed someone to help me gather intelligence on Dutch's operation. Someone I could trust completely. So you used me. I protected you. Kept you close while I did the dangerous work." Clara's voice softened. "The consumption, the medicine, all of it was real. But I've been working to bring down Dutch's entire network. For months." Clementine stepped forward, her hand finding John's arm. "The children. Your letter said he took children." "A lie to draw you out." Clara's eyes were apologetic but determined. "Dutch is holding the entire town hostage. He knows I'm a federal agent now, knows his time is running out, so what's the plan?" "We end this, tonight, all of us together." The marshals filed into the small kitchen, their presence filling the space with authority and purpose. John looked at Clementine, seeing his own mix of relief and apprehension reflected in her eyes. The game had changed. Dutch was no longer just a bounty hunter with a grudge. He was a cornered animal, dangerous and desperate, and they were the only ones who could stop him. "Tell us what you need," John said. Clara smiled, and for the first time in months, it reached her eyes. "I need my brother and his partner to help me save this town." Outside, the sun began its descent toward the horizon. In the distance, the old mine waited, empty and patient. But the real confrontation would happen here, in the streets where people lived and worked and hoped for better days. The final act was about to begin. The plan was simple. Dutch held the town saloon, his men posted at every window. The townspeople huddled inside, hostages in their own gathering place. Clara's marshals would surround the building while John and Clementine created a distraction. "Smoke," Clementine said, grinding herbs between her palms. "These plants, when burned, create thick clouds. Confuse the eyes, make breathing difficult." "Non-lethal," Clara added approvingly. "We need Dutch alive to testify." John watched Clementine work, her fingers sure and steady. She'd mixed Apache healing herbs with common sage, creating something that would cloud the air without permanent harm. The same knowledge that saved lives could protect them too. "How long do we have?" "Minutes. Dutch expects us at the mine by sunset. When we don't show, he'll start making examples." The weight of responsibility settled on John's shoulders. An entire town's safety rested on their ability to outthink a desperate man. He'd faced similar pressure during the war, but this felt different, more personal. They moved through the gathering dusk, 3 separate groups converging on the saloon. Clara's marshals took positions around the building's perimeter. John and Clementine approached from the back, where the kitchen door offered the best access. The coyote pup whimpered softly from its sling. Clementine whispered soothing words, her voice barely audible. Even the smallest member of their makeshift family understood the gravity of the moment. "Remember," John said quietly, "we create chaos, then get out. Let the marshals handle the rest." "I remember." But something in her tone made him pause. Clementine's eyes held a determination that went beyond their simple plan. She was thinking of every person Dutch had hurt, every family torn apart by his greed. "Don't do anything foolish," he warned. "Define foolish." Before he could answer, the kitchen door creaked open. They slipped inside, moving through shadows toward the main room. Voices carried through the thin walls, Dutch's commanding tone, rising above the rest. "Your federal agent sister thinks she's clever," Dutch was saying. "But I've been planning this for months, every move, every possibility." John's jaw tightened. Through a crack in the door, he could see the main room. Dutch stood behind the bar, his gun trained on the crowd of frightened townspeople. His men flanked the windows, watching the street for signs of trouble. "Time to go," Clementine whispered. She struck a match, touching flame to the herbal mixture. Smoke began to rise, thick and white and strangely sweet. John helped her position the burning herbs near the building's air vents, where drafts would carry the smoke throughout the structure. The effect was immediate. Shouts erupted from the main room as the air grew thick and hazy. Dutch's men began, coughing, their eyes watering. The townspeople pressed handkerchiefs to their faces, understanding instinctively that this was rescue, not attack. "Now," John said. They burst through the door as the marshals stormed the front entrance. The saloon erupted in controlled chaos, Dutch's men surrendering as they struggled to breathe through the herbal smoke. But Dutch himself was gone. John spun, searching the hazy room. The back door stood open, evening air rushing in to clear the smoke. Dutch had escaped in the confusion, leaving his men to face justice alone. "Where is he?" Clara demanded, her gun drawn. "Gone," John replied, "but he won't get far." They pursued him into the gathering darkness, following the sound of running. Footsteps toward the edge of town. Dutch's horse waited in the shadows, already saddled for a quick escape. "You're too late," Dutch called from the saddle. "By morning, I'll be in Mexico. Your little victory won't last." John raised his gun, but hesitated. Dutch was right. Once across the border, he'd be beyond federal reach, free to rebuild his criminal empire, to hurt more innocent people. "Let me," Clementine said softly. She stepped forward, her hands empty but her voice carrying absolute authority. "You're not going anywhere, Dutch Vanderberg." "And who's going to stop me? You?" "No." She smiled, an expression both gentle and implacable. "They are." Apache warriors emerged from the darkness, their horses silent as ghosts. Chief sitting. Bull rode at their head, his face carved from stone and starlight. Behind him came a dozen of his best men, armed and ready. "The medicine woman called for justice," the chief said. "We answer." Dutch's horse reared, sensing the trap closing. Around it, the Apache had surrounded him completely, cutting off every escape route. His dream of Mexico crumbled into dust. "This is between white men," Dutch snarled. "You have no business here." "The woman who saved my son has business here," the chief replied. "That makes it our business too." Dutch's surrender was swift and final. Faced with overwhelming odds, he threw down his weapons and raised his hands. The federal marshals moved in, binding him with the same efficiency they'd used to capture his men. "It's over," Clara said, relief evident in her voice. But John was watching Clementine, seeing something in her face that spoke of deeper resolution. She'd found what she'd been searching for all these months. Not just freedom from pursuit, but the strength to stand and fight for what was right. 6 months later, they stood in the same spot, But everything had changed. The old homestead had been rebuilt, transformed into a combination home and medical clinic. A sign by the front door read, "Marston and Washington, Healing Arts." The coyote pup, now grown into a sleek adult, played in the yard with two human children. Arthur and Sadie, orphans from the territory, had found their way to the clinic and stayed. Their laughter filled the air, bright and hopeful. "The governor's letter came today," Clara said, approaching from the house. "Official pardons for all charges, and a commendation for service to the territory." John smiled, his arm around Clementine's waist. "What does it say?" "That you're both heroes. That what you've built here is exactly what the territory needs." They'd treated everyone who came to their door. Apache warriors and white settlers, former slaves and children of former masters. The clinic had become a symbol of what was possible when people chose healing over hatred. "There's something else," Clementine said, her hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach. "Something I need to tell you both." John looked at her, understanding dawning in his eyes. The hope she'd spoken of that first desperate day had become reality in ways neither of them had dared imagine. "A baby?" Clara asked, her voice soft with wonder. "A baby," Clementine confirmed. "Due in the spring." John pulled her close, his heart full of gratitude for the woman who'd changed his life with a desperate plea and stayed to build something beautiful. Around them, the clinic bustled with activity. Patients seeking healing, children seeking homes, communities seeking hope. The sun set over the rebuilt homestead, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. In the distance, the mountains stood eternal and patient, guardians of the healing valley below. Chief Sitting Bull arrived as evening settled, his usual quiet dignity intact. "The boy is well," he reported. "His leg grows strong. And your people?" "Thriving. The alliance you helped forge between our tribes and the territorial government bears fruit. There is peace." It was more than John had ever dared hope for. A family, a purpose, a future where the color of one's skin mattered less than the content of one's character. "What would you have done?" he asked Clementine as they watched the stars emerge. "If I'd been different that first day, if I'd been the kind of man you feared, I would have survived," she said simply. "I always have. And now I don't just survive. I live." The coyote stretched out beside them, content in the warmth of family. Arthur and Sadie had fallen asleep on the porch, their heads pillowed on Clara's lap. The clinic sat quiet, ready for tomorrow's patients and tomorrow's miracles. John thought about the long journey that had brought them here, from that first desperate encounter to this moment of perfect peace. Every choice, every sacrifice, every act of courage had led to this. A home built on love, a family forged by choice, a future bright with possibility. In the distance, an owl called to its mate. The sound was answered, two voices joining in the ancient song of belonging. Like the people gathered on the porch, they had found their place in the world. The healing was complete. And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.